sorry. This, let me see. I have to bring my MATLAB here.
Yeah, we see your
Sorry.
screen. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. All right. Um, Hello everyone. I I want to present an idea that occurred to me about behavior of particles, turbulence, and then the behavior of people. So, and also how turbulence helps mixing, and how in the same vein people moving around during the time of an epidemic also help to spread the disease. So some of the notions that we already have about turbulence, things we can do to mitigate turbulence, if we also apply the same concept to human movements, the results is it ends to, it helps to mitigate the spread of disease during an epidemic. So for me to illustrate all these ideas I'm talking about, I have uh, an SIR model simulation that I built is available on MATLAB File Exchange. So I can show you where to get it. In case you just want to experiment and then try something out yourself. So the SIR model is model the susceptibles, the infectious, and the recovered among a population that is experiencing an epidemic. So the susceptible are the people that are likely to fall sick. They can become infected and then they fall sick. So you have the infected, which as those are already carrying the disease, and then they can infect others. So we call them infectious. Then you have the recovered. Now, usually there is a differential equation for this problem, but I am not using the differential equation here. I'm looking at it from a particle perspective. So that is why the behavior of this can be likened to the behavior of fluids. And that is why we can talk about turbulence in this case. So the general idea is I have a confinement and I have particles in that confinement. So those particles represent, human beings. So then we have one of them, usually at the beginning, that will be infected. So I give it color red. So I can just run a simple case and then stop it before, before the time evolution, so that I can explain what I'm saying. So now, can you see my screen here? Well, I don't know. Anyway, I will assume that you can see my screen. So now here we have a red dot. That is one infected individual. So within this community, we have 100 individuals. So all the green guys here, they are the susceptible. They can become infected. So if anybody is infected and then the person now recovers, or the person dies, or that person is quarantined, all right, so we call that person removed. We say that has been removed. So we don't use the word recover because there are things that are equivalent. Either you die, either you recover, or you get quarantined. So the three of them are the same. So we use a general name removed that applies to the three of them. So if it is removed, then the color of that individual becomes blue. So now in this model, for someone to become infected, you just have to be close to an individual that is already infected. So now, so in this calculation, as the time evolves, I use the velocity to change the position of each particle. So, and you know how to do that is just x plus v times delta t. That is integration of distance. Velocity over position. That is how you update the new position. But now there is another thing that comes into play, which is acceleration. So acceleration here now modifies velocity, and velocity modifies position. But the acceleration is not random. It depends on the distance between any two particles. So that is a gravitational acceleration. So, but of course, I cannot use gravitational acceleration, because if I use that, that would mean particles will come and stick together. But what we are trying to model is when a particle comes close to another one, it bounces off. So in that case, that should be negative gravity. So we have to put a minus sign in front of that calculation for the acceleration, so that when two particles come together, then they bounce off. So that is like a simple way of implementing conservation of momentum, conservation of energy. So that is what was done. So now I will run this this simulation for the default values that I have set up. So now we're not going to look at the meaning of each of those parameters that we're using. So what effects will any change in those parameters, what effect will it have on the result of the simulation? So let us just run this and see what we have. So I will move my MATLAB back. Now, so you can see as the more particles are becoming infected, or let me say more people are becoming infected, then one is already recovered. So we have two, we have three recovered now. So now the number of recovered is shown at the top, I mean from the top down, while the number of people that are getting infected is the red that is shown here. So in one way, the recovered or the removed is kind of an integration of the number of people that get sick. I mean, the number of people that get infected. So anyway, that can easily be seen from the differential equation anyway. But that is not what we're not talking about the differential equation here. We just want to look at the impact of each of those parameters on the results. So first, I need to explain the basic set of the default value for all these parameters that I've used and what each of them mean. So now let us just look at this quickly. So at the top here, we have MP, which is the number of population in the community. Then we have, so I'm using 100. The reason I'm using 100 is so that we can easily read off the percentage of the community that is infected at any particular time without having to do any other calculation. So now DS is the minimum distance, safe distance you can be from an infected person. So in that case, if you are below that minimum distance, you can become infected. Then the probability of getting infected is no longer 0. But if you are higher than that distance, you cannot be infected. Then we have probability of infection, which is if you are below that minimum distance, what is the probability of you being infected? So this has a meaning. The DS talks about how contagious the disease is. If the DS is large, that means that disease is very contagious, like coronavirus from 6 feet means it is really contagious. But if you need to come close to like 1 feet before you get infected, that means that disease is less contagious. All right. So probability of infection has to do with your personal hygiene. If you wash your hands regularly, or you don't touch any of your mucous membrane, that is fine. In that case, the probability of infection is low. But if you are not, you're not practicing personal hygiene, the probability of infection is high. Then we now look at this. Then the TR is the time at which that it takes the government to quarantine any individual, or how long it takes for the person to die if you're infected, or how long it takes for the person to recover. So these three things are kind of the same. So if the government is very responsive, that as long as somebody gets infected, the government removes that person, the infection cannot propagate, the disease cannot propagate, cannot spread. So in that case, if the government removes the people quickly or the person die quickly, then that time will be low. If the government wastes time, they are not responsive, then that time will be high. So then we have F, which is the repulsive force. It is a repulsive force is a measure of social distancing. So if the repulsive force is high, it means people don't get close to one another, they are staying away from one another. So that is that will mean we have a high repulsive force. But if people don't practice social distancing, they will get close, repulsive force is low, and then a lot of people can be infected. Then we now have the stay at home factor. That is what proportion of the population is staying at home. So that is the last parameter. So now the default value of MP is 100 for initial infection, number of infection. The first person that is infected, I use 1. Then we have DS, which is the minimum safe distance is 0.04. The probability of infection is 0.2. TR, which is the time it takes to remove the person that is infected, is 2. And then the strength of repulsion, which is social distancing, 2. And the default value for the stay-at-home factor, 0. Now, what we're going to do is we have seen the impact of this now. We've seen that for this default value, about 50% of the population gets infected. So now we can ask ourselves, so what happens if we say 50% people stay at home? What will be the effect? I mean, yes, we've been told that it will reduce the rate of infection. But can we actually test that idea? So let us try that now. So to do that, so I'm going to just come up here. Okay, let me remove this breakpoint that I added here. No. So now, so I'm just going to come here and then change this this 0, which is the stay-at-home infection stay-at-home factor to 0.5. So let us see what the result is. So I'm now you can see that about half of those particles are not moving. So they are at home. All right. So we are going to see what will be the effect of this. Of a lot of people staying at home. So at the maximum, about 50% of the population was infected before in the former run. But now it's between 30 and 40. It's not up to 50% again. That's you can see the output now. So we found out that about 50%, less than 40% are now infected. So, and a lot of people remain uninfected because right now there is no more infection. I mean, a lot of people that are infected have now become they have been removed. So we still have about 20% of the population that never got infected. So in this case, there's something they call herd immunity. That is what we have now with this community. So there are still a lot of people that are susceptible, but they cannot become infected because a lot of people have already been infected and they have been removed. So which means they can no longer get infected. So if you introduce any new person that is infected into this community, the chance of the infection propagating is really low because it's going to encounter a lot of people who are already immune to that infection. So most of those 20% will still remain protected. So now, which means stay at home is really good. All right. So now we can look at the effects um, of personal hygiene. So in this case, we are looking at the effect of all these parameters one by one. So the effect of personal hygiene. Now, if you look at it, I have changed the stay at home. Now, I am not talking about the initial population. I'm not talking about the population. I'm not talking about the distance, the minimum safe distance, because the minimum safe distance we cannot change. Is an intrinsic property of that virus or of the germ. So we cannot do anything about it. But the other things that we can change are the one I am touching, which is the probability of infection, which is your personal hygiene, the time that someone is removed, that is how effective the government is. Then F, which is the repulsive function. So that is a measure of social distancing, and then the stay at home, those 4 parameters. So we've checked stay at home. It helps to reduce the number of people that get infected, all right? So now let us now check if the government is able to remove people that get infected quickly. That if government remove the person after 1 day instead of after 2 days. So let's check this out on 1 day and then see what the effects will be. So every other thing remains the same. The stay at home now is I will change that back to so the stay at home, I'll change that back to 0. Um, yes, so I'll change that back to 0. Okay, that is 0. All right, so I'll change that back to 0. So, which is nobody stayed at home, but the rate of removal has increased. So let us just run that and see what the result is. So now nobody stayed at home, but the government is able to remove people as soon as they get infected, just after 1 day. So we can see that the effect is kind of almost the same as 50% staying at home. So if the government is quarantining people that are already infected and people stay at home, then the number of people that get infected at the maximum, at the peak of the infection, will still be between 30 and 40% instead of 50%. So now what if we now combine these two effects? I mean, what will be the result if we combine the two of them? So let's see the combined case. So if we combine the two of them, so let's say we make stay at home to be 50%. Let's say half of the population is not respecting the other 50%, and then the government removed anybody that is infected after 1 day. So let's see the overall effect. Now, this results in a a very flattened curve, like health professionals were saying that we need to flatten the curve. That is what you see here, because now a lot of people are staying at home and the infection is gone. All right. So less than 10% of the people get infected. So government is doing its own part, and then the people are also doing their own part by staying at home. So just half of the people, and then the government is just 50% more efficient than before. And we see the results. The result is that a lot of the population remain uninfected, and then the infection dies out quickly. So now let us now look at one more case where we practice a better personal hygiene. So let us assume that every other thing remained the way they were, that people are not staying at home, and the government is not really effective. So we still have, it still takes 2 days for anybody to be removed, but the probability of infection reduced to 0.1 instead of 0.2 by half. So let us see what will be the result of that. So here we can see that even though a lot of people practice their personal hygiene, we still found out that a lot of the people, I mean, still get infected, right? Like, I mean, only about 10% of the population did not get infected here. So, which means even though personal hygiene is good, I mean, like it will help, it is actually not a good solution to this one. That is why, even though they say practice personal hygiene, they still say, okay, you all have to stay home, please, because stay home is really, really, really important. So, so we can see that personal hygiene is actually not a solution. It's good to practice personal hygiene, but staying home is kind of more effective. And also, the time of removal by the government is also more effective. So now let us now look at a case where we practice an extreme kind of social distancing, but we refuse to stay at home. So we can see, we'll see what that case will give. So let's see here. Um, so I will increase the coefficient for the personal distance, which is F, which is the repulsive force. So I make it 5. So, and I kept every other thing the way they were. So this guy goes back to 0.2, and every other thing remains the same. So let's see what the results of this will be. So if you observe really closely, you find out that it is difficult for the particles to touch. They are kind of trying to avoid one another. So that's because I increase the strength of the repulsive force. Some are still touching, but you see that I mean, a lot of them are trying to stray away from one another. So now social distancing is good, but you see that it is not really that strong. We still get up to about close to 40%, rate of maximum infection. So now, what this tells us is that, all these measures by themselves, none of them alone is really effective. But if we practice all these things together, the government does its own part, reducing TR, then you do your own part, personal hygiene, reducing the probability of infection, then you increase social distancing, the F, and also people stay at home. It will be difficult for the infection to propagate. That is what we're going to see next. So I'm going to change all those factors. So let me keep this guy at 0.5. I leave this F at 5. The TR, I take that to 1, and then give this guy at 0.1. So now let us see what the result is. So you can see that with all these things in place, like if the government responded on time and then we all do our part, reducing your probability of being infected, and also you stay at home, and also you practice social distancing, that is the high value of F. So only like 2% of the population will be infected, and then the effect of that infection will die out as quickly as possible. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lateef. And basically, yeah, that's very actual topic what we are doing, and it's very very actual topic. So I saw some similar diagram with particles instead of people. That's what they do on the World Health Organization website. So did you
Yeah.
see something? So you try to follow the same this picture, right?
Yeah, no, actually, I've done a lot of work with particles before. Earlier, I did particle swarm simulation that I use for optimization. So in that work, what we just did is just you have bunch of position representing the parameters you're trying to optimize. Each of them, each candidate is a solution. Then you have velocity for them, and then they try to move. So, but they move towards the one that has the minimum value. So the same concept is what I use here. So the same way we handle the boundaries is what I did here. So instead of just dealing with optimization, considering this case for a disease. And also in optimization, I do not have to calculate the distance between them. I do not have to change one particle from one form to another. So it's just my previous experience. I just make some modification to adapt it to the new problem. So, but I did not use the World Health Organization. Maybe I think I have not seen that one. The one I saw is not from World Health Organization.
I see. Yeah, I saw some, but I will maybe send you some link when I saw. But I anyway definitely discovered it from screen, and let's see. So I think if you really want to proceed with this, you should promptly publish it because now you have experimental data to compare from nature that nature creates for you, and it's actually, and I hope this note will be actual in couple of months. So, and I know now they publish papers like they have like very prompt review process that people publish papers during the week or whatever, just regarding a pandemic, regarding coronavirus, regarding all the studies, because that's something actual. I can connect you also to one of my friend, Harry Caesar. He's also he did some kind of theory but he did theoretical study, not modeling. He did theory, theoretical model, theoretical prediction formulas, how it looked like, and he
Okay.
is adjusting some coefficients. So that's what he did. And I told I can, if you want, I can connect you to him. You can talk, because if so what you presented, I will send you link to what I found. It's really quite not, no, results are different, but the
Okay.
approach with these particles, how they are frozen, how they move, it's really
Okay.
quite similar. So, and I cannot say that what they publish on World Health Organization website, it's really worse than what you're doing. So maybe you propose better idea. So,
Okay.
but I said, but definitely, if you want to publish it, you should just present results better with some plots, with some
Yeah.
models, and do it promptly. Really, during 1 or 2 weeks,
Okay.
where this disaster grows.
Then there's something I did not want to mention because the time is up. It's about how we can use these to simulate turbulence. So now, because I have actually started that, but there was no time, so that's why I did not talk about it. The the transformation is a little more challenging, but I think it may work. So maybe I can share the file with the rest of the people now.
Okay, very good. Now, yeah, we are a little bit lack of time, but people who are still there, let's please ask questions. Let's go to audience, because I didn't. Please ask questions. Any question? Yeah,
I
please.
just want to make a comment.
Yeah, please.
Okay, sir.
That's very interesting. I think another thing that we need to also focus is the x-axis. So the
Okay.
time it takes for the community to reach that maximum. For sure, y-axis
Okay.
is extremely important, how much percent of the population get the disease.
Okay.
But the x-axis is important because if the time it takes for you to reach the peak
Mm-hmm.
is so fast and so short,
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah,
hospitals cannot cope with it.
yeah. Exactly, yeah.
But it's very important actually
Yeah. So
because of
not just the why, yeah, exactly. So
exactly.
that's yeah, I understand.
Yeah, that's all. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, more comments, please. Well, some people may ask about relevance to turbulence turbo, but key point is now this is more actual now. If you don't uh, win this pandemic, there will be no turbulence classes anymore. So, so that is actual and relevant. Well, any more questions from the audience? Okay, then we should send Lateef, and Lateef, let's maybe keep on Zoom. I want to talk to if you're available right after we close.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about this, what you can do with this. It's really interesting. So regarding the class, so thank you again for participating. So today I will record the videos and hope I will be able to post it. So we didn't have chance to listen the video from Mark Kirby, but I hope he better next time present himself then. So next time we have on schedule Amber and Brian, right, as well. So are you ready for this on Tuesday?
Yes, yeah, I will be.
Okay. Okay, good. And maybe Amber is not here, I don't know. But anyway, so thank you for today. Sorry for delay with the time. Thank you and see you next time. So let me turn it out. I stop recording and see you. Stay healthy and see you on Tuesday.